Welcome to Tongueless the Bard's recitals of some of Tamriel's greatest adventures. This is the main quest of Skyrim, Chapter 1, Unbound. Stenvir awoke to the hard rattle of a cart and the cold bite of northern wind on his face. His hands were bound, wrists raw from the rope, and his whole body throbbed with the aches his restraints had forged. Pale morning light spilled through the pine boughs overhead. Across from him sat a man with a warrior's bearing, broad-shouldered, blond, blue-eyed, the kind of Nord whose ancestors had carved legends onto stone. Beside him muttered a wiry fellow whose eyes darted like a trapped hare's. The others aboard the cart sat in hollow silence, fear, submission, and defeat carved into their faces. "Hey, you! You're finally awake," the warrior said, voice carrying easily above the creaking wheels. "You were trying to cross the border, right? Walked straight into that Imperial ambush. Same as us, and that horse thief over there." The wiry man snapped. "Damn you storm cloaks. Skyrim was fine until you stirred everything up. If they weren't hunting you, I might have stolen that horse and been halfway to Hammerfell by now." The warrior's eyes hardened. "We are all brothers and sisters in binds now. Thief." A soldier barked from the front, "Quiet back there." The thief scoffed. "What's wrong with him?" He nodded to yet another member of the cart. "Why's he gagged? Watch your tongue," the warrior warned. "That is Ulfric Stormcloak, the true High King." The thief paled. "Ulfric. But if they captured you, then, oh gods, where are they taking us? To the place all warriors go." The warrior replied with a grim calm. "Sovngarde awaits." The thief shook his head wildly. "No, this can't be happening. Where are you from?" the warrior asked him. "Why do you care?" A Nord's last thoughts should be of home. Rorikstead. "I'm from Rorikstead." The carts rolled into Helgen as the Imperials assembled. The villagers stared as if witnessing men already dead. The thief whispered frantic prayers to every god he could name. When the carts stopped and the captain barked orders, reality settled over them like a burial shroud. "End of the line," the Stormcloak muttered. "Walk with dignity." They dismounted the cart, led by a thick convoy of Imperial soldiers. "You're not going to kill me," the thief shouted, suddenly breaking free of the ranks that walked them. Calls, harsh and urgent, came from the guards, but he'd made no more than 10 paces before 2 arrows met his back. His run ended with a guttural gasp and a thud upon the hard, frozen earth. "Better to go by the axe than an arrow in your back," Ralof muttered. The line of prisoners shuffled forward through the frost-bitten square, the sun a pale coin behind the smoke of morning fires. Stenvir felt the weight of Imperial eyes upon him, judging, measuring, condemning, though none could place his face or name, or even what he'd done to wind up with such a price upon his head. Hadvar stepped close, helm under one arm, his young face pulled taut with unease. "Captain," he murmured, nodding towards Stenvir. "What should we do?" "He's not on the list." The Imperial captain did not pause. Her voice was as cold as the steel on her hip. "Forget the list. He goes to the block." A shadow crossed Hadvar's features, but he bowed his head. "By your orders, Captain." Then quieter to Stenvir. "Follow the captain. Prisoner." The crowd pressed closer, hungry for blood or justice. Both tasted the same in Helgen that morning. General Tullius, the Imperial general himself, stepped forward, cloak snapping in the wind like a banner of war. "Ulfric Stormcloak," he declared, as the prisoners came to a halt before him. "Some here in Helgen call you a hero. But a hero does not use the voice to murder his king and usurp his throne." Ulfric's reply was lost beneath the gag, only guttural defiance, a rumble like a wolf straining against a leash. Tullius continued, You started this war, plunged Skyrim into chaos, and now the Empire will put you down and restore the peace." He motioned to the headsman. "Put the first prisoner on the block." One of the stormcloaks from Stenvir's wagon was thrust forward. He did not struggle, though his jaw jutted stiff with pride. As they forced him to kneel, a distant roar rolled across, the mountain spines like the growl of some waking titan. The noise prickled the hairs on Stenvir's neck, and even the crows silenced their caws. Hadvar frowned. "What was that?" Tullius did not flinch. "It's nothing." "Carry on." The captain gave a curt nod. "Yes, General." "Give them their last rites." The priestess of Archay stepped forward, robes glimmering with frost. She lifted her arms skyward. "As we commend your souls to Aetherius, blessings of the 8 divines upon you. For you are the... For the love of Talos, shut up and let's get this over with," the condemned stormcloak snapped. The priestess's mouth tightened. "As you wish." He glanced back at the legionnaires, fire in his eyes. "Come on, I haven't got all morning. My ancestors are smiling at me, Imperials." "Can you say the same?" The axe fell, a single thud, and the warrior's head rolled into the dirt, eyes still open, still proud. A commotion erupted, calls from prisoners, and some even from those unfortunate on that morning to call Helgen their home. "You Imperial bastards," a stormcloak shouted. "Justice," someone else spat. But next to Stenvir, Ralof just bowed his head, his gaze locked on his fallen comrade, as fearless in death as he was in life. He murmured. When the scene settled, the captain once more raised her gauntleted hand. Its point landed on Stenvir. "Next, the Nord in rags." Another roar tore the sky open, nearer this time, deeper, like the mountains themselves were giving voice to their ancient wrath. Hadvar stepped back, eyes wide. "There it is again." "Did you hear that?" I said. The captain barked, "Next prisoner." Hadvar swallowed hard. "To the block, prisoner. Nice and easy." The crowd shifted. Stenvir felt their eyes burrowing into him as he walked forward, every step echoing like a drumbeat to doom. The block loomed before him, dark with blood, slick with frost. He knelt. The wood smelled of iron and death. The headsman raised his axe. Above, the wind twisted, wrong, unnatural, and a third roar cleaved the sky like a world-ending trumpet blast. The mountains quivered. The earth trembled, and from behind the peaks a shadow unfurled, wings vast enough to blot the sun, and an hunger large enough to devour the world. A voice rolled across the sky, like a prophecy, spoken by the deep primeval things which held such powers. A dragon, born of nightmare and hailed by fire, descended upon the tower. Stone shattered beneath its talons as crashed down onto the turret top, black scales gleaming as if forged with night. Its maw opened, and a torrent of fire and force ripped through the square. The headsman stumbled forward, his axe slipping from his grasp. Soldiers were thrown aside like leaves in a gale. Stenvir was hurled onto his back, breath stolen, vision swimming. The executioner was hurled aside, stone shattered. Fire rained. What in oblivion is that? Tullius roared. "Move! Protect the civilians!" The captain cried. "Stenvir," came Ralof's voice, cutting through the chaos like a beacon. "Nord! This way!" Stenvir staggered to his feet, snow and ash swirling around him. He sprinted toward the keep, as flames engulfed the square in a tide of ruin. Ulfric Stormcloak, cloak torn and eyes aflame with fury, nodded once. "Go!" he commanded, his bonds cut and his gag removed. "Get out, while you can—" "Not without you, my Jarl. You have fate enough beyond this misadventure. I'm the only one deserving of that axe, and if I meet my end here today, I will end that dragon with me." Stenvir didn't need telling twice. He took the reluctant Ralof by his rags and hauled him towards the shelter of the stone keep. The doors were ajar, either by design or blast impact, and they slipped through the gate into the fortress. The keep was dimly lit and oddly still, though dust and stones shook from the ceiling with every beat of the dragon's wings. Ralof slammed the door behind them. "What in the nine was that thing?" a Stormcloak whispered, pulling a sword from a nearby rack and severing Stenvir's bindings. "Stay close. The gods may have thrown us to the wolves, but we're not dead yet." They moved through the corridors, following the dim glow of torchlight. Stenvir's foot brushed a limp body, another Stormcloak, slain before he could fight. Ralof's face hardened. "Looks like we weren't the only ones to escape down these tunnels." Here, his eyes turned from sorrow to purpose. He prized the leather chestplate from the soldier and handed it to Stenvir, before passing up a short sword. "Stay close. We're not alone down here." The corridors swallowed them whole, narrow, twisting arteries of stone and shadow where the torchlight seemed afraid to linger. Stenvir and Ralof moved in a half-crouch, breaths shallow, ears straining for any hint of life in the oppressive dark. At each corner they paused, listening. Was that the scrape of an Imperial's greaves against stone, or the ragged breath of a wounded Stormcloak clinging to life? And then, so suddenly, as to startle Ralof to the ground, a door ahead crashed open, and two figures lurched into the corridor. The color red was reserved for Imperials, so the people of Skyrim could know the presence of the Empire, and redder than before were the robes that cloaked the armor of the captain who had condemned them to execution in the first place. "You too," she shouted. "Get them!" Before they knew it, the Imperials were upon them. Steel clashed in the tight corridor. Ralof fought like a man born in battle, but the captain's blade struck sparks from his guard. The second soldier lunged at Stenvir with a snarl, blade slicing the air toward his ribs. Stenvir parried, the shock jarring his arm. The soldier pressed him hard, forcing him back against the cracked stone. For a heartbeat Stenvir saw the man's eyes, cold, dutiful, merciless. Stenvir twisted aside, let the blow skim his leather-clad shoulder, then drove his elbow into the soldier's throat. The man gagged, stumbled. Stenvir seized the opening and slammed his blade through the gap between gorget and helm. Stenvir withdrew his sword and saw Ralof finish the captain, with a vicious cut across the neck. She collapsed, helmet rolling across the floor. "You fight well." "Almost as well as me," Ralof panted. "Come, the dragon won't wait to bring these tunnels crashing down on us." Smoke thickened. As they descended into the bowels of the keep, the prison cells lay in ruin, skeletons slumped in cages, forgotten, discarded, primitive. It served as a reminder to both men that dragons weren't the only monsters in that corner of the world. Beyond the cells, the stone gave way to natural rock. The tunnel's claustrophobic grip began to loosen, the walls peeling back into a cavernous chamber where the air shifted, cooler, carrying the faint echo of movement. "A mine?" Ralof muttered. "No," Stenvir said quietly. "A refuge, a bolt hole for cowards or kings." A soft clink drifted through the shadows, metal brushing metal, rhythmic, purposeful. Then came the murmur of low voices, indistinct but growing clearer, like ghosts emerging from the fog, the scrape of a boot, the subtle rattle of a shield. A torch's glow bled slowly across the far wall, painting trembling gold across the stone. Ralof's breath hitched. "They're coming," he whispered. And then, with a sudden flare of torchlight, the silhouettes resolved into armored figures, helms gleaming, shields raised, blades already drawn. A platoon of red and steel. "There!" he shouted, voice reverberating off the cavern walls. "The prisoners!" The first arrow did not hiss but shrieked, tearing past Stenvir's ear close enough to move his dishevelled hair. It shattered against the stone in a spray of splinters. "Forward!" Ralof roared, and they charged. The collision was savage. Shields slammed with a crack like thunder, metal screeched as blades raked across armor, and the cavern became a cage of slaughter. Ralof met the vanguard head-on, his shield splintering under the force of 2 Imperial soldiers driving into him at once. He twisted, slamming the rim of his shield into a soldier's jaw with a crunch that sent teeth skittering across the floor. Stenvir caught a blade on his bracer, felt the sting as steel tore skin, and answered with a brutal upward stroke. His sword sheared through the Imperial's pauldron, biting deep into the collarbone. The man screamed, fell to one knee, and Stenvir tore the blade free in a spray of red. Another soldier rushed him, thrusting for his stomach. Stenvir twisted aside, grabbed the man's wrist, and drove his forehead into the Imperial's nose. The crack was wet and immediate. The soldier reeled long enough for Stenvir to plunge his sword through the gap beneath the breastplate. The soldier gasped once, and went limp. Above them, an archer loosed again, and shilled into the ground beside Stenvir's feet. Before the archer could knock another, Ralof seized a dagger from the belt of the man he'd just felled. "Down you go," he muttered, and hurled it. The blade whirled through torchlight and darkness alike and buried itself cleanly in the archer's throat. The man staggered back, choking on his own blood, then toppled from the ledge. His body hit the ground with a dull, final thud. The cavern fell still except for their ragged breathing. For a moment neither man spoke. "I'm glad of anyone. It was you who grabbed me by the keep," Stenvir panted. "There were 5 Imperials," Ralof replied. "That's at least a 2-man job. I'd be feeding the worms like them if it wasn't for you." They clapped each other on the shoulder, half in congratulations, half for support after the exertion they'd just made. Then they set off, taking the torches held proudly by their enemies, and to their great relief, the tunnel began to arch upwards. "How far does this thing go?" Ralof said. "If these tunnels are designed to deliver the Jarl to safety, then possibly miles," Stenvir grimaced. They passed through further sections of the cave, some bare and barren, some stocked with modest structures and supply sheds. But to their great relief, no sight nor sound of Imperial soldiers did they see or hear. Their spirits were sobered, however, when from up ahead they heard something that stilled them in their march. It was a heavy, wet growl. The shadows shifted with unnatural weight. The cavern appeared a little less oppressive, and the faintest hue of natural light bled into dark. Stenvir froze, heart hammering, as his eyes found the source of the sound. Ralph's hand went to his sword, muscles tensed like coiled steel. "A bear," he whispered, eyes narrowing into the dim torchlight. Ahead, the great bear lay slumped in a corner, a mountain of fur rising and falling with each slow, steady breath. Its paws twitched, claws scratching lightly against the stone, and the faint scent of blood and musk hung in the air, an invisible warning of the beast's power. It was the first fortune they'd walked upon that day that, at this hour, the beast was overcome by slumber. Stenvir and Ralof pressed themselves against the jagged wall, bodies taut with tension. Every movement was measured, deliberate, each footstep a whisper against the stone, even the faintest scrape of metal against rock, or the soft shift of clothing could awaken the predator. Ralof's eyes flicked to Stenvir, then back to the bear. "Hold your breath if you must," he murmured, voice barely more than a shadow. The 2 Nords crept forward, inch by careful inch. Stenvir's hands tightened around his hilt, ready to unsheath it should the bear leave its honeyed dreams. Each step sent echoes through the cavern, but the bear's eyes remained closed, its growls low and rhythmic like distant thunder. "If a bear's made its home here, then we must be nearly out," whispered Stenvir once they were confidently out of earshot. "It's getting lighter," Ralof agreed. As if obeying the wish hanging on Ralof's words, a breeze greeted them, and birdsong reached their ears. At last they reached the tunnel's end, and pale daylight spilled through the exit, washing the cavern in silver. "By the 9, we've done it." Ralof held his hand to his head, and heaved a sigh heavier than the cave they'd just trodden. A morning frost greeted them, crisp, cold, and fresh. Snow lingered on tree branches and hilltops, and glistened merrily in the brilliant morning sun. And then, into the distance, a shadow swept across the sky, the great dragon covering a mile in a wing-beat. Whether it was done with the city, or beaten back by the resilient Helgen guards, it made its retreat towards the faraway mountains, where it disappeared. "Come," Ralof said, "to Riverwood. My sister Gerdur will shelter us. Talos willing. We live to see tomorrow." Stenvir gazed upward, breath-stirring frost in the air. Ralof hurried on ahead, but Stenvir did not go so readily. For the first time, he felt something stirring within him, like a word half-remembered, like the echo of a forgotten song waiting for a voice. Ralof's battle with destiny was over. He would retreat to Riverwood and tell the village of the attack. Word would spread, and he would settle down in his new life. But for Stenvir, he didn't feel like he'd vanquished destiny this day. In fact, he felt his calling was only just beginning.